There are many catastrophes in space. Whether it was as simple as a malfunction to as terrible as many deaths, many of these unfortunate circumstances occur. So, in this video, I will be telling you the top 10 worst space disasters ever. While you probably know the worst space disaster, you may not be aware of the second or third worst, so watch until the end. Without further ado, let's get started with number 10. In the early and mid-1960s, the Soviet Union was dominating the space race, reaching milestones way before the United States. In March of 1965, a Soviet cosmonaut named Alexei Leonov became the first human to perform a spacewalk, and the spacewalk duration was for 12 minutes and 9 seconds. However, when we tried to enter back into his space shuttle, he found he strangely couldn't enter because his suit had been ballooned. Luckily, he managed to fit inside the door, but sealing the door was incredibly difficult to do. In addition, it was so tense in the spaceship that all radio and television were cut off. Despite all this, they managed to seal the door, but their struggles didn't end there, for they landed 300 miles off course. Fortunately, a crew retrieved them, and Alexei Leonov is still alive today. Since this was a near catastrophe, I think it's fair to put it on the 10th spot. Number 9. Speaking of near catastrophe in space, we have the infamous Apollo 13, one of the most famous missions that have ever occurred. Now, this was originally intended to be the third manned mission to the moon, but after an oxygen tank exploded 56 hours in the flight, the mission had to be aborted, and the main focus was then to get back to Earth safely. Long story short, they managed to stop most of the issues, and were back on Earth safely. I think this should be slightly higher on the list than the one with Alexei Leonov because this was much more revolutionary, as the crew learned so much during the mission and, in my opinion, they came closer to death. However, still no one passed away. Number 8. On June 29, 1971, we have the only time in human history when humans actually died in space. This is because most of the deaths occur before launch or landings. Anyway, 3 Soviet cosmonauts sadly passed away when their cabin depressurized during the flight home, though there was no other damage to their spacecraft. For obvious reasons, this will go down forever as one of the worst space disasters in all of history. The next few space disasters were worse than even the Challenger disaster, because they were space mishaps relating to testing that killed many civilians, each of them. However, since they weren't exactly space disasters with astronauts, I will include them, but not as worse than the top 3 on this list. That being said, I would like to say these were very dreadful, with innocent people dying from a problem that was made for a testing of rockets. Now, let's move on to number 7. When China first entered the space race in the 1990s, nobody took them seriously. Things have really changed, but in 1996, a test rocket misfired and landed in a nearby village in China, killing at least 6 people. It gets more complicated, though. American technology companies were working with the Chinese rocket scientists, and this incident triggered Congress to pass some legislation that prohibited technology flowing so easily out of the United States, with corporations being fined millions of dollars. If that wasn't enough, this was the last time the US and China worked together on rocket science. At number 6, we have another disaster coming from a country trying to catch the United States. In this case, Brazil, with their space program. On August 22, 2003, and this next incident is a reminder of what happens when countries push too hard for immediate results. 21 people were killed when a rocket exploded on its launch pad in northern Brazil. Horribly, smoke from the jungle fire the explosion caused could be seen from hundreds of miles away. This will always remain a very costly, catastrophic event. Getting to the top 5, we have another launch pad disaster, this time one that occurred on March 18, 1980. In the Soviet Union, a launch pad disaster killed 48 people and injured another 87. The official explanation for the deadly explosion had the blame on the dead crew, but when another explosion of the exact same type was narrowly avoided just 18 months later, it was determined there was actually an engineering problem that needed to be addressed. These past 3 disasters should show as a lesson to humanity. to be cautious about testing of rockets and space launches, even if they are unimportant launches, because even those can take lives. Next, we have another incident that took the life of someone in space. On April 24th, 1967, a hero of the Soviet Union, Vladimir Komarov, an engineer who commandeered the first ever spaceflight, which carries more than one passenger. Unfortunately, he was also the first human to ever die in space, as after his spacecraft's parachutes failed to open on re-entry, causing his death. However, due to this mission's failure, our understanding of space exploration was lengthened, because through its failures, we learned what goes wrong and what to avoid when it comes to space launches. Next, the third worst space disaster, Apollo 1. Like the failure from the Soviet Union, third place on this list, the cabin fire that took the lives of Apollo 1's 3 crew members was actually beneficial for NASA in the long run, because the American space program took a good look at itself and began focusing on safety as well as exploration in science, something which is truly essential, as seen by all the space disasters on this list. Congress got in and held tough, having meaningful sessions about the nature of the Republic's space program. Although Apollo 1 was a terrible disaster, taking 3 innocent lives, we are actually better off thanks to what happened. We are now at the second worst space disaster. In February 2003, the Columbia Space Shuttle had served NASA for 22 years before it exploded upon re-entry to Earth's atmosphere. Throughout its lifetime, it had served 27 spaceflights before disaster struck on the 28th mission. This took the lives of 7 astronauts as it disintegrated upon re-entering the atmosphere. This was a horrible and unexpected tragedy, and this actually had the first Indian woman to go to space. At last, we have considered by most as the worst space disaster that has ever happened to this date. This is, of course, the failure of the Challenger mission. 7 crew members, including a teacher, were killed when the Challenger broke apart 73 seconds into its flight. The launch was televised, and it's very unfortunately been reported that 50% of all school children watched it, because the teacher was the first civilian to go to space. This tragedy was so bad that it resulted in a 3-year break in the shuttle program. However, like with everything that went wrong in each of these catastrophes, when the program resumed, NASA adopted a new conservation safety program to avoid anything like what happened in the Challenger mission. Hopefully, we will rebuild from all these unfortunate circumstances and prevent more lives from being lost in the future. Although naturally space travel is a dangerous thing, with very high stakes and, in many cases, a possibility of death, we should focus on safety first, and then space travel. Please subscribe for more content like this, and tell me in the comments what you think is the worst space disaster.